And this little girl looked up at me, and again, we locked eyes. And I thought, how the hell can somebody walk in this room and see that and think anything other than, how can we get you out of this hell? Paul, how can you go face to face with somebody selling you a child and not have them see the anger and the hatred in your eyes? It's a valid question. You know, and we're laying there in the sand. This is hot sand, there's ants crawling all over, and they're throwing all of these traffickers down on the ground. Those 13, 14-year-old girls in that video, they look pretty happy to be at that party. Are you sure you're rescuing them?
How can you carry out this mission? You know, you're here to play this role, and I mean, what goes through your mind when you're faced with these children? Hi, my name is Caroline Corey. You may know me from my work in consciousness, energy medicine, and my films. However, today, I'm here to talk about a completely different subject. I came across this material. I saw pictures, videos, and documents with my own eyes that broke my heart. We're talking about human trafficking. Nothing to do with conspiracy theories or political agendas. You're going to hear stories about the innocent victims, the traffickers who committed these horrific crimes, the operators who risked their lives to go undercover to rescue these children and bring them home. We're going to talk about the global issue. More importantly, we're going to talk about the solutions. I will be joined by my co-host, who's an expert and a powerhouse on the subject, Paul Hutchinson. This is Saving the Children. Paul, so glad you're here. We've been talking about this for a very long time, and here we are. Welcome.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
How did you get into this in the first place? Because a lot of people don't realize that it didn't just happen overnight for you, right? So please tell everyone how you ended up in this world.
Well, as you know, I have led or played a key part in over 70 undercover rescue missions in 15 countries over the last 10 years in identifying and rescuing kidnapped and trafficked children. 10 years ago, I was in the finance world. I'm not a government agent. I haven't had any training, none of those things. Now, I have a special set of skills from a previous life that makes me somewhat safe in a dangerous place. But I wasn't trained for this. I got a phone call almost 10 years ago from our Attorney General, who introduced me to a Homeland Security agent who was in Latin America, identified a bunch of children, and he needed me to not only help pay for and help raise some money for this rescue, but to actually play a role in the rescue of these children in Colombia. The role was this. The Homeland Security agent had identified some traffickers that were selling over 50 children in the Cartagena, Colombia area, and some other rings that were somewhat connected in other places of Colombia. And he called me up and he said, Paul, he said, we've identified all these children and I think we can rescue them all, but I need your help. I said, well, how much do you need? Thinking he needed me to donate some money. He said, I need you. can you be in Colombia in 2 days?
What?
Exactly, you need me. I said, well, why, what can I do to help? He said, the head trafficker in this area has a piece of property. He wants to build a sex hotel, a child brothel resort. He needs a few $1,000,000 to put it together. He has a business plan in which he believes he can make tens of millions of dollars a year selling children to wealthy Americans.
Oh my God. So now this is the first time you hear of something like this?
Yeah, I was...
What went through your mind?
Well, I had been introduced to him a couple weeks before by the Attorney General.
Right.
And he had told me that he thought there was only 20 children there. They needed like $50,000 to rescue them. And that was the first time. And I thought, when I got this phone call from the Attorney General, and he said, Paul, I need to talk to you about something that's pretty dark. He said, I know you're very involved in child-related charities. I had served on many different boards. I was on the board of directors for Make-A-Wish at the time in our area. I was actually the incoming chairman for Make-A-Wish at the time I got the call. And he said, I need to talk to you about something that's pretty dark. And I said, well, darker than kids dying of cancer? I don't know of anything darker. He goes, yeah. He said, this is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. And good people don't know that it's happening. He was talking about human trafficking as a whole. He said there's more today than all 300 years of the transatlantic slave trade put together. And most people think that I did. I thought slavery disappeared at the time of Abraham Lincoln. You know, I had no idea that it existed today, and especially had no idea that it existed this dark when it came to children being sold for something this horrible. And so when he told me that, I'm like, I didn't believe it at first. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You know, who would do that, right? Who would sell a child, and who would pay for any of those things, for sex with a child, for organ harvesting, any of those things? How lost do we have to be as a human race to have anybody on this planet think that that's okay at all?
I mean, you hear about this, it's like in the movies. Did you think, this could be real?
Well, I'd seen Taken, a bunch of different, there's movies out there about teenagers being taken and sold and whatnot, but I had no idea that it was as big of a problem that it is. Caroline, this is the second most profitable criminal enterprise. It surpassed the illegal arms trade. And it's soon, a lot of people think it's already surpassed the drug trade. If not, it's soon going to surpass the drug trade. And it's because you can sell a bag of cocaine once, you can sell a child for sex 5, 10, 15, 20 times a day for 10 or more years.
It's insane that you would think a human being, a child, could be sold for sex. To me, it's just horrific. It really is.
I've done some crazy things in my life, and I put my life in danger doing some stupid stuff. To rescue a child, even one child, that took away all the fear. And let me back up just a minute, just to tell you the life I was living at the time, okay? When I got the call from the Homeland Security agent, I was in a very expensive hotel in Atlanta, Georgia. I was raising money for a multi-billion-dollar real estate investment fund that I helped to found. I started it. And so I was there with my business partner. We had reached this pinnacle of success. I had over $2 billion of assets under management at the time. I was meeting with some of the wealthiest families in the world, convincing them that they should invest their money with us when I got this phone call, right? I was in this bubble of success. Here I am in this world, having no understanding of the pain that some people were going through. And so I get this phone call, and I said, yeah, I'll help. What can I do? And he said, can you be in Colombia in 2 days? Well, I get a call from my business partner about an hour later. And it was John, and John had heard from my other business partner that I was planning to do this. And John's exact words were this. He said, Paul, have you thought this through?
What are you, crazy?
Exactly. He said, you're set. You're on this path where you could sell your shares, you could buy an island, and you could be happy the rest of your life. And my answer was this. I said, John, would I really be happy if I bought an island, if I bought a yacht, if I bought a jet. I said, if I was doing something else dangerous, if I was climbing Mount Everest tomorrow, you and I would have the same conversation. He said, yeah, we probably would. I said, and when I'm 95 years old, and I look back on my life, and I said, I helped build this multi-billion-dollar company, and I climbed this mountain, and I helped rescue this many children. Which of them matters at all? And he said, yeah, Paul, you need to go. What's interesting, I called back the Homeland Security agent. I said, okay, I'm in, I'm coming, but you know what? I don't know if I can be there in 2 days because I've got to go, get some change of clothes. What do I need to wear undercover? He goes, well, Paul, you're coming as a wealthy investor that wants to invest in this big hotel thing. And at the time, I'm on this phone call with him. I had $2,000 cufflinks on my, right? I had a custom suit on that cost more than my first car. It was very conservative blue on the outside, and you open it up, and it was bright pink, right? It was like boom in your face. This is this energy I was living in, right? I had a custom shirt. I had a Gucci. I had a watch on at the time that cost over $50,000. Conspicuous consumption was my role. I'm out there raising money and showing all this stuff. And so he said, you need to come as you are.
Right. You're like, aren't you the perfect character for this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And,
wow.
and that's
the wealthy
reason.
American. The wealthy American.
I was the wealthy American with a big, unchecked ego. That's what this demand was coming from. Now, I had no idea. I thought at the time that guys that did these horrible things with kids, what was my definition of a pedophile at the time, right? I thought the average pedophile was a guy who was 45 years old, single, living in his mom's basement, overweight, stringy hair, addicted to porn. That's that image that I thought that it was. And what I realized in this work, the reason they recruited me and the reason I was able to do an additional 70 missions was because of the fact that the demand was coming from guys like Jeffrey Epstein, right? There's this wealthy, powerful egos that had done all these other things that thinks that their power and their greed and their money allows them to do whatever they want to other people, and they have these unhealthy sexual addictions that lead them down these dark roads. I mean, I wasn't doing weird sexual things or whatever. I had no attraction to children, but the money and the ego was something that the traffickers were looking for.
Wow. So here you are, you land in Colombia, then what?
I'm a fish out of water. I didn't realize how dangerous it was until the 2 Navy SEALs that picked me up put me into a full bulletproof car. I mean, we're talking level 4 stuff that can handle machine gun fire. I'm like, okay, this is cool, but what do I not know about this place? That mission in Colombia ended up with the rescue of over 120 victims.
That's crazy.
It was.
In one rescue? How is that possible?
Well, because these traffickers brought them in from all different places. Now, in Cartagena, Colombia, there was 54, but there was more in Medellin, there was more in Armenia, Colombia. And one of the operators, a good friend of mine named Joseph, he's a Krav Maga expert. He said, when I realized the magnitude of the problem, he said, is when we showed up with 2 boats on the dock, because we were going to have the sting at one of these at an island. He said, we show up with these 2 boats. These boats were massive. They were the size of school buses. And these traffickers are loading in dozens and dozens of children that were being sold.
Wow. It's just so mind-blowing. Is it mostly in South America, though? And I mean, tell me a little bit about how widespread this, how common this is.
This is a global problem. In fact, the United States is the #1 producer and consumer of child pornography in the world. And Americans are the consumers of sex-trafficked children abroad. In fact, the reason they brought me in was this. The majority of the demand for this kind of consumption in second and third world countries comes from wealthy connected businessmen in first world countries. I was the type of person these traffickers were looking for. And so as I'm sitting there and I'm learning about this from these operators, these seasoned operators who had been doing this for decades, I found out that there are children from every single country that are being brought into this. The statistics today are super difficult to understand, to really get to the bottom of, because nobody knows for sure how many there are. You can go online, you can find some numbers of human trafficking as low as 24 million, which is still a huge number, as high as 50 million. Either way, there's more than all the years of slavery in the history of the world combined. Now, the sad thing is this: of those, 1/3 of them are children.
This is really like shocking. I feel so kind of hurt, I want to say. I feel so bad, like at my core. Children, these are little humans that we're supposed to protect. It just blows my mind.
Here's a statistic in the US that I think you might be interested in. Every single day in the United States, over 1,000 children go missing. An average of 365,000 children a year are going missing in the United States alone.
And here we are, we think we're so civilized and advanced and proper, and what's going on under our noses? Children going missing. What, for sex slavery? I mean,
A lot of them, yes.
how do you become a victim? Are there different types of victims? How does that work?
So when I first got brought into this world, I had no idea what a victim looked like. In fact, the reality is there were people in my own family who had suffered abuse as children, and I didn't even know the signs. I had no idea what to look for. When it comes to trafficking of children, I've seen children who were sold by their own families. I've seen children that were sold by their babysitter. I've seen children that were snatched up in front of a subdivision or in front of a church house, etc. I've seen children that came from very, very poor families that they were just trying to earn some extra money. There are so many different ways that they can be brought in. I've seen children coming in from all kinds of different types of situations. Unfortunately, the majority of them came from broken homes. They came from a place where they had super low self-esteem because there was abuse in the home, there was alcoholism in the home, there was only one parent that was there, and that parent was never there because they were working 3 jobs and whatever else. And so they were in a position where they could be easily groomed or taken out of that family. And in so many of the times, it was within a foster care program, or they were children of the welfare system in some way.
But what about also wars and natural disasters and things like that, right?
Huge, yeah, it happens all the time. In fact,
Ukraine and other wars.
Exactly. We have teams over in Ukraine from the different foundations that we have helped. I haven't been there doing undercover because I have come out of undercover in the last year plus, but we have teams over there full time. Wow. That are identifying children that are being lost in a system with a lot of confusion. In fact, there was a bunch of kids that were lost in the earthquake in Haiti.
Wow, yeah.
And were sold into trafficking year after year because nobody knew they were alive. And this is a time where these human traffickers can come in and say, okay, if there's enough chaos going on, then nobody's going to be looking for them. What they don't want is a healthy family that's putting a whole bunch of money into billboards and everything else to find these kids. So if you can go into a war-torn area or into an earthquake area or something like that, then there's not as many people looking for these kids because they don't know if they're alive or where they are. Yeah. In the 70 plus missions that I've been a part of, I have seen it all. I have seen affluent families who lost their children. I've seen runaways. I've seen foster. I've seen all kinds of things. Now, I will say this. Statistically, a child being taken from a healthy family and put into a container ship and taken to a different country, that's pretty low from a statistic standpoint. The majority of trafficking victims come from broken families, okay? It's a very, very high percentage of children within the the child welfare system within the foster care programs, a very high percentage of them end up being sexually abused or trafficked in some way. These children are runaways. In fact, I'll give you an example. Just recently, we did a rescue mission in Ecuador. The leads came in from a girl who was in the hospital in Peru.
Okay.
So my wife had gone in as part of the aftercare, and she was with this girl, and her story is typical for so many of these children. Here's her story. At 8 years old, she lost her mother, and her father was a raging alcoholic and very, very abusive. And so she was sent to live with her aunt and uncle. By the time she was 10 years old, her uncle was raping her. She went to the family, and nobody believed her, said she was just making up stories. So, of course, because of the abuse she was going through at home, she had low self-esteem. She didn't have any friends at school. She walked with her head down all the time, and she was the perfect candidate for traffickers to start grooming. And so a much older man started paying attention to her and said, hey, you know what, I'll take care of you, I'll be your boyfriend or whatever. And so...
was he a friend of the family?
No.
Like, how did he get to know her?
Now, I will say this, in many situations, in fact, over 90% of child abuse, sexual child abuse situations, over 90% of them are familial. They're family members. They're somebody the family knows. In her situation, it wasn't somebody the family knew, but she was in an area in Ecuador that he was in that area, and he was identifying some children that would be victims. He convinced her to go with him to Peru, to just, hey, you know what, let's go, let's get out of here. I'll be your boyfriend and whatever else.
You'll have a better life.
You'll have a better life, exactly.
And of course, coming from that broken family with the uncle raping her, I mean, for her, that sounded pretty good, I guess.
Exactly. Here's a man that can be a better father figure, that can take care of me. He takes her to Peru, takes away her phone, takes away her passport, takes her shopping for some really sexy clothes. And then introduces her to some other girls that are working as teenage sex trafficked victims, and says, here's what's going to happen. You're going to bring in a minimum of $1,000 a day. Now, in that area, that meant she would have to sleep with somewhere between 20 and 50 men a day just to meet that quota.
Wait, like, how is it even possible? Like, was it every half hour? Like, they had that clientele
it's all day
right
long,
there?
from when you were earlier in the morning and then at night, and half an hour each client. It's a horrible situation. Now, if she didn't bring in that $1,000, then she would get beat up, physically assaulted.
Now, how old is this kid?
Now, at this point, when she ends up in the hospital, she was a young teenager when she was brought into it. Okay, at 15 years old. She didn't meet her quota, and she got beat up to the point where she went to the hospital.
Oh my God.
Okay. Fortunately, the nurses and everybody else that was there, that was attending to her, recognized some of the signs. She didn't have a parent that brought her in. It was somebody else that claimed that they were a relative, but all of these different signs were there that she was being trafficked. And so that's when our team was called. And they went in and spent some time with her, figured out what was going on. We followed the leads that we got from her and ended up taking down an entire trafficking ring. Not only the guys that were in Peru at the time, but the guys in Ecuador. And took down that ring, rescued a few dozen children as part of that, and put these guys in prison. We had one of the children that we rescued in Acapulco. She was 13. And her mother had no idea. She was sleeping in her own bed at night. Her aunt was working with the traffickers. And her aunt was babysitting her and showing her pornography. And she said to this little girl, this 13-year-old, she said, you know what? You're going to lose your virginity sometime anyway. If you lose it to one of these wealthy Americans, then you're going to earn a few $100s. She was charging us $5,000 for this child, right? Her and a bunch of others that these traffickers were working with were selling these, getting these kids addicted to drugs, showing them pornography, desensitizing them so that they could traffic them.
So when this little child is being touched inappropriately, obviously, I mean, this child is terrified. How can they go to a parent and say, you know, hey, this is what happened with Uncle Harry? I mean, how do you fix this? How do you...
The most important word that you can understand that puts this all into perspective, this is how the traffickers, this is how the groomers control the children. It's one word. It's fear. Okay? It's fear of retribution. It's fear of what might happen to their sister or their mother. There was a little girl that was taken in Mexico at 12 years old. She was taken to New York. And she was trafficked in New York. And to make sure that she never said anything to anybody, the trafficker said, here's the thing. We know where your sister lives. We know where your mother lives. Here's a picture of your sister walking to school. You don't want anything bad to happen to her, do you? So that happens all the time. Or if a child is in their own home, then somebody that is crossing those lines with that child is going to make them feel guilty. You don't want your mom to be mad at you, do you? You know, she would be very upset if she knew this was happening. Or if you do tell somebody, I'm going to get in trouble and you're going to get in trouble. This is going to be very, very bad for your family. Or if they're an older child, you don't want everybody to know what kind of a person you are, right? This needs to be a secret just between you and I. So this is why having a relationship with your children where they can be very comfortable talking about these difficult situations and being open with them. You need to say, hey, you know what? To your 10-year-old, to your 8-year-old, to your 5-year-old, these are private parts, okay? These are not to be touched by other people. Parents so many times are like, oh, I don't want to talk to them about that. You need to talk to them about that because this is real. Here's the numbers. And this is important to understand as well. Yes, there's somewhere between 8 and 12 million children being sold in trafficking. That's a massive number, but it's tiny compared to the real problem. Here's the real problem. Literally 1 in every 4 women that are watching us right now on this film, 1 in every 4 have been a victim of sexual violence as a child. As a child. Somewhere between 40 to 50% or more of all women at some time in their life have been a victim. But literally 1 in 4 or more. It happened under the age of 18 years old, and most of them in their own homes.
Yeah.
So yes, we should be mad about what's happened in Colombia and Peru and Ecuador and all these places, but we should be ultra vigilant about what's happening in your own house, in your own backyard, in your own neighborhood.
Yeah, you know, I work a lot with, I've been working with different people from all over the world, actually, and on basically what we call regression, you know, going back to a trauma, a point in your life where you had some sort of trauma. And it could be anything. And most of the time, the women, or men, by the way, it's not only women, you know, don't quite remember exactly what happened. They know something strange happened that is related to their current, you know, illness or chronic, issue that they're struggling with. And every single time we go back through this regression, and it's a point when they were a child, every single time they were abused, sexually abused by a parent.
Yes.
I've seen it so many times. I mean, it blows my mind. Like every single time it goes back to the same thing. Being abused by an uncle or a father or an older brother even. Yeah. It's sick. And so here you are. You're looking at these children now, many of them at the same time, thinking all of these kids came from these broken families or broken backgrounds or what have you, and they are very scarred. Yeah. how can you carry out this mission? You know, you're here to play this role. And I mean, what goes through your mind when you're faced with these children?
The most difficult thing is looking at these children in the eyes, being undercover, and seeing the fear in their eyes. I remember the very first time I was sitting on a chair. I was this tall, sitting down. And this trafficker brought this child. She was 11. And standing up, she was eye level with me sitting down. And I remember looking into her eyes, and she was shaking. And she was looking at me, believing that I was the man that was going to defile her. She was a virgin. This was her first time being sold. And I looked in her eyes, and I made a promise at that moment to myself, to the universe, to God, and to every single child in that situation, that I was going to dedicate my life to eradicating that evil. And it never got easier. 70 missions later, it never got any easier. I could look at the traffickers in the eye. I could say, yeah, you know, we're looking for this, for, you know, whatever, and we can bring, but when I saw the children, and I saw that look in their eyes, I remember one in Haiti. And this trafficker opens up this steel door, and there was a concrete block. There was no windows on this room. It was 5 foot by 6 foot room with a concrete block. And this little girl looked up at me, and again, we locked eyes. And I thought, how the hell can somebody walk in this room and see that and think anything other than, how can we get you out of this hell? What made me so mad, that little girl, her parents were killed in the earthquake 7 years before. And every single man who walked through that door for 7 years was there to harm her. We were the first ones to walk through that door that didn't have that intention. So, yes, broken homes, runaways. Very seldom are they from some home where the parents are going to spend lots of money to go find the kids. But yes, that does happen, so keep them safe. But let me talk about this, because you talked about the boys, okay? And you talked about the fact that so many of these children that are being abused in our homes, it's being done by a brother or an uncle or a parent. And so I believe that if we figured out how to solve that, then we save millions of children. There's hundreds of millions of people who have experienced abuse in their own homes as children. Men and women both. It's not just a problem with women being abused. Literally 1 in every 5 men at some time in their life have been a victim of sexual violence. Most of them was when they were children. In fact, 1/4 of them, it was under the age of 10 years old. And here's what happens. Some of them grow up and never remember it. The average age of somebody speaking about their abuse as a child, that average age is 52 years old. That's my age, right? I've got grandkids. I've worked my career. If somebody is holding on to that pain that long, and sometimes even longer, how does it come out? For some people, it comes out in anger issues or low self-esteem or anxiety or depression. Some people, it comes out being a contact offender. In fact, literally 1 in every 3 people, 1 in every 3 who've experienced that kind of trauma as a child end up passing that trauma on to somebody else. So this is the travesty. Yes, I was focusing so many years on that end link of that chain, a trafficked child pulling them out of hell. But the reality is every single one of us need to step back and say, okay, this problem is even bigger. If I walked out on my front porch today, even in an affluent neighborhood, and you looked right and you looked left, there's a very high chance that one of those houses or more is a very dangerous place for children. So we need to step back and say, okay, how can we help that 1/3? God bless them, those 2/3 that grow up and become fighters and protect innocence at all costs because of their pain. But how do we take that 1/3 and come from a place of compassion and love them before they ever cross that line? Now, we don't have a time machine, but what we do have is a world full of broken people who are dealing with pain, that if we can give them the help, this is why I was so excited to connect with you. You are a master healer. You are able to take people into this space and help them release their trauma to the point where they can be happy. But it's not just helping them be happy. I believe that by helping people release their trauma and just talking about it and releasing it takes that statistical probability of them being a contact offender in the future to very low, if not completely gone.
I mean, that's the goal. And that's precisely the idea of this, in fact, is even when you hear about these stories and what you're doing, I think it helps the average person to start to tap into their own history and story, because like we were saying, most of them don't remember. They don't remember the details. They know something really, really bad and traumatic happened to them in their childhood, but they're not quite sure what it is. And they're scarred for life, like you're saying. And so I'm really hoping through this conversation, it will bring up this root cause of why are we stuck today in so many ways, in so many areas of our life. It could be because of these traumas. And like I was saying earlier, I'm shocked every single time it goes back to sexual abuse. And I'm like, what's happening here?
The men who were abused as children have the hardest time bringing it up later and working through that trauma. Why? Subconsciously, they're thinking, if I bring this up and tell people that I was touched by my uncle or beat by when I was a child, then that makes me less of a man. No, it doesn't. You were 8, right? You were 8 years old. There was a very broken person passing on their trauma to that 8-year-old child. What happened to you as a child does not define you today. Now, the importance of talking about it and working through it is beyond what I can even describe right now. The chances of passing that trauma on, if you talk about it and you work through it, are so much less.
Tell me a little bit more about the other types of survivors, the children that you were able to rescue. How did they end up there? What happened there?
A combination of poverty and in some cases greed is what's driving this. Okay. In the cases in Southeast Asia, it was abject poverty. And in certain places in Latin America as well. These children are coming from very, very poor homes. And the parents are thinking, how am I going to even pay for the food for my other children? And they'll sell one of their children into sex slavery. There was one that we did in the Dominican Republic. This trafficker, who was an escaped convict from the US, connected us with a mother who was selling 2 of her daughters, 9 and 11 years old. And she was selling them, not just, hey, take them for a night for $500, $1,000, whatever else. She was flat out selling them for good, for $10,000 each. It was pure greed, because in her country, $20,000, she was going to be set up like a queen. Now, the sad thing is, she thought that we were taking these children to Miami to be working in an underage brothel there in Miami. And on the phone, she said to me this. She said, if you're ever to the point where you're done with them, I need you to be done with them. Meaning, I don't ever want this to come back on me. Do you understand? And I thought to myself, how does a mother a mother, get to the point in her life where greed for money allows her to look at her own children in that regard? What have we come to as a society where any of us, anywhere, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's $1 million, whether it's $5, it doesn't matter, to put a price on a human life.
It's like it's unfathomable. Like what goes in her mind that someday she says, I mean, these are children that she bore in her, in her womb. Like, how is it possible that you can get to that point? I don't know. I don't have words for it. I'm kind of shocked,
We didn't get enough information on the mother to find out what put her in that place.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that I've realized. I've come to an understanding that if I'm ever judging another human being, whether it's for selling me her daughters, whether it's for cutting me off on the freeway, if I'm ever judging another human being, there's a 100% chance that I don't have enough information to make that judgment. Now I can, if it's a trafficker, I can do everything in my power to make sure those children are safe. But in the case of this mother, I don't know. I don't know if she was abused as a child. Now, I have a little bit less compassion for her because she was selling her children for $20,000. It was obvious that it was about the money, right? It was about a lot of money.
And also she said, when you're done with them, just be done with them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's criminal.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just criminal.
Yeah.
So, okay, we need to go back to the root cause to heal this problem. What's your recommendation? How do we go about this?
I realized in 10 years of undercover work and seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children, looking them in the eye, understanding where they came from, what kind of broken homes that they were coming from. I realized that just doing that undercover work was never going to fix the problem. Because each time we went in, we would pull these 20 children out of hell. But then there was not enough being done to solve the demand side, to fix the families, to all of the things that were creating trafficking. Not enough was being done there. And 20 more children were being sucked into the deepest recesses of hell. And so the answer is simple. It's not difficult. The answer is this. Hug your children. Love them. Teach them the sanctity of life. Teach them the precious temple that their body is. Teach them to respect and love each other. Teach them compassion. And help them resolve whatever trauma happened in their life. As they resolve that trauma, especially your little boys. Because what happened to them, they're even more afraid to talk about, and they're more likely to pass it on. So love them and help them talk about what happened and understand that the things that happened to them don't define them today. That every cell in their body over the last couple of years is a completely new cell. You're a completely new body. And you're holding on to these things emotionally. Help them release it. Love themselves. And when we do that, we save millions of children.
Yeah, and I want to add to this the parents themselves who also are broken inside to just intend to heal themselves, whether they're ready to heal or not, but at least to start with them wanting to heal their own trauma, whether they're conscious of it or not. Everybody's got some sort of trauma. Of course, it's a matter of degree. Were you bullied as a child or, sexual abuse? That's a big stretch. But regardless, we all have trauma somewhere. And so I also feel the parents should begin with their own healing as well. And then help their children, hug the children, help them just communicate, be comfortable
they've said, I don't know how true this is, but they've said that it's impossible to love somebody else more than you love yourself. So if your goal is to help that child heal, yet you look in the mirror and you don't love that person in the mirror, if you haven't forgiven yourself, if you haven't worked through some of those things, then it's difficult to be able to really, truly create that safe space for your children, to give them that healthy self-esteem and that self-love that they need to keep them safe throughout their childhood and throughout their life. So you're exactly right. Encouraging the adults to heal and to at least talk about it. You may not even remember it, but if there's something there to say, you know what? Yeah, this happened to me, but it doesn't define me today. I am this sovereign being of light and love and truth, and I can live a life of integrity. I can live a life in passing on that love and protection to others. We do that, we save millions of children.
Every which way you look, it's heartbreaking, whether it's the parent with the sick little child or the lost child or the kidnapped child or the the trafficked child. This problem is so overwhelming. How do you even begin to resolve it? It is so complicated.
It is, and it's not going to be solved on this level. It's going to be solved on a much higher level. The only way to fix this problem is to elevate the consciousness of humanity as a whole and have them turn to God and trust the timing and stop trying to control all of these things that, like this child that might be passing on, and understand the difference between the finite and the infinite. If we understood the infinite nature of life, of love, of relationships, then a lot of this pain would disappear. And if we also understand that we are not defined by our past, the things that happened to us, or even the things that we did when we were out of alignment with our true self, when we can truly forgive ourselves and others and cleanse that energy and come to this higher space of consciousness within ourselves and others, that's the only answer to fixing this problem.
I totally agree. This is incredible. I'm so glad you said that.
So as you can see, these children come from all kinds of different backgrounds, and I've seen them all. And I'm so grateful to have played even a small role in saving the children.
Thank you so much. This is amazing, sharing this time with you. And I hope everyone will listen to these stories and at least be inspired to look at your own healing, begin your own healing. Because at the end of the day, we cannot help the children if we don't help ourselves. We can't love the children if we don't love ourselves. You heard it. I hope this conversation is going to inspire you to begin your healing journey. We have to begin this healing journey on ourselves before we can heal the children, before we can heal our humanity. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.
Subscribe.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. There's so much more I'd like to dive into, but unfortunately, we can't do that here thanks to the heavy censorship efforts from big tech. If you want to explore this topic further, you can dive deep by accessing our entire uncensored library on unified.tv. There's a link in the description below this video if you want to check it out. A membership to Unified TV gives you unlimited access to hundreds of uncensored podcasts, investigative journalism, documentaries, films, and content that was once available on major streaming platforms like Netflix, but is now banned from the internet. For just $14.99 a month, which is less than $1 a day, you get access to it all. Your subscription also helps keep the platform running free from censorship and corporate influence. Please consider supporting us and enjoy all of our unfiltered and thought-provoking content in return. Thank you very much, and I will see you on Unified TV.